Hi, everyone. This is the February 2022 demo debate for Debate Us on the topic Resolved. In the United States, right to work laws do more harm than good. On the affirmative, speaking first will be Srikar Satish and Conrad Pallor. And on the negative, speaking second, will be Tejas Balaji and Caroline Waldman.
We affirm, and our sole contention is unionization. Right to work laws decrease the rate of unionization in states that adopt them. This is true to the free rider problem. Indeed, right to work laws incentivize free riders, as Ishinowitsky and Zach 91 finds that in states without a right to work laws, unions can negotiate union security provisions that require employees covered by the union to become members or pay dues. However, right to work laws prohibit these provisions. Workers can choose to be free riders, where they can enjoy the benefits of union activity without incurring the expense of membership. A review of the literature confirms that the free rider problem, union membership declines once states adopt those laws. Calder and Kelser in 2021 finds the evidence is very clear. Right to work laws have a negative impact on union membership. The long-term impact on unionization is negative as well, indicating the decline in unionization is not temporarily. Empirically, post-adoption of right-to-work laws in Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, West Virginia, and Kentucky, unionization rates have dropped significantly. As Page in 2022 finds, the right-to-work laws are associated with a drop of about 4 percentage points in unionization 5 years after adoption. The impact of right-to-work laws on unionization rates is larger for women and public sector workers. The impact is threefold, and first is strengthening the middle class. Unions are key to higher wages and employer-provided benefits for both union and non-union members, as Hirsch in 2012 finds that unionization is associated with about a 15% increase in hourly wages in the typical state. Unionized workers are more likely to receive benefits, and their benefits are often better quality than non-union workers. Union membership is associated with about a 19 percentage points increase in the likelihood of having employee-sponsored healthcare insurance, and a 24% increase in the likelihood of having employer-sponsored retirement plans. Unions could also have significantly and positively affect wages and benefits of non-union workers by serving as a threat to non-union employees in highly unionized industries. The effect is confirmed empirically in right-to-work states, as Mitchell in 2001 finds the mean effect of working in right-to-work state results in a 6 to 8% reduction in wages for workers in these states, with an average wage penalty of 6.5%. The second impact is decreasing voter turnout. Union membership incentivizes political participation, as Golkander and Kelsler in 2021 finds that unions have to protect themselves and benefit from fiscal policies, as regulatory and other changes via political activism. Union membership is strongly correlated with voter turnout. Bloomgart in 2015 quantifies that union members are about 4 percentage points more likely to vote. The decline in union membership since 1964 has affected the aggregate turnout in both low and middle income individuals more than the aggregate turnout in high income individuals. Right-to-work laws are credited with both decline in union membership and voter turnout. As Golkander and Kessler in 2021 continues, the reduced unionization after right-to-work laws have a negative effect on union revenues, forcing unions to reallocate resources away from political activities to membership retention. In sum, the evidence indicates that right-to-work laws are associated with a decline in voter turnout. Increase in voter turnout results in less income inequality as politicians pass representative policies that benefit the average voter. Conversely, declining voter turnout means greater inequality, as Mahler in 2010 finds that a 1% increase in electoral turnout is associated with a reduction of about 3/4 of a Gini point in overall inequality. Controlling for other variables, a relationship that is statistically significant. Low voter turnout means unequal and socioeconomically biased turnouts. A third impact is lives, and subpoint A is workplace facilities. Unions play a critical role in advocating workplace safety, directly reducing workplace mortality. Zerboom in 2018 finds the unions form an important part of the social machinery that ensures public health, and so their recent decline may be concerning. 1 percentage point decrease in unionization is associated with a 2.8% increase in occupational facilities. Subpoint B is employee-sponsored benefits. Wallace in 2019 finds that union members all over the country earn higher wages and have much better benefits and enjoy greater employment security than workers in the same jobs who don't belong to unions. Empirically, right-to-work laws have reduced life expectancy by more than a year. Wallace concludes that life expectancy in right-to-work states is on average a year shorter than those into non-right-to-work states. Differences in health and socioeconomic indicators are not small and marginal. On median, 10 more people for 100,000 die of diabetes in right-to-work states than states that are not. And for these reasons, we strongly urge an affirmative ballot.
We negate. Contention 1 is personal savings. Union membership dues are draining the pockets of the working class. Shirk 15 finds that unions charge workers roughly 10% higher dues and pay their full-time top officers $20,000 more annually in states with compulsory dues. Detrimentally, HR Block finds that union dues come directly from worker pockets. This is why the Labor Union Report finds that when they have the choice, workers are turning away from unions, with overall union membership down 12% in 2021. Contention 2 is business investment. The US economy is still in dire straits. According to Tepper 22, the economy entered into a recession during this past summer. Shirk 11 writes that since unionized firms earn lower profits, invest less, and create fewer jobs than comparable non-union firms, luckily, right-to-work laws address the issue. Shirk continues that right-to-work states are much more attractive for business investment, which is empirically verified by states like Idaho and Oklahoma. Right-to-work laws boost business investment in 3 ways. First is through increased capital expenditures. Merikei 18 finds that unionization decreases the free cash flow projects generated for firms and increases risk. They continue that empirical studies confirm the negative union effect on investment, reducing capital expenditures of US firms by 6.5%. Second, by attracting new businesses and investments. Cebula 20 writes, the implementation of right-to-work laws is a very straightforward means by which to improve economic and social outcomes, as they generate an opportunity to attract more capital, either in the form of new firms or in the expansion of firms already located within the state. Gondelhaver 21 furthers, right-to-work laws are favorably associated with increased investments, and Cebula explains, as the greater the degree of economic freedom, the more successfully and efficiently markets perform, and the greater the prosperity created through private enterprise. Third is by increasing innovation. Nguyen 22 finds that the right-to-work laws exert a significant and positive effect on corporate innovation. The enactment of state right-to-work laws strongly encourages firms to generate innovation outputs with higher quality and quantity, and as a result, gain stronger competitiveness over product market rivals. She terminalizes that following the adoption of right-to-work laws, firms experienced a 3.8% sales growth rate from industry rivals located in non-right-to-work states. This is crucial, as Evans 13 finds that 50% of US annual GDP growth is attributed to increases in innovation. There are 2 impacts to increasing investment. First is increased employment. Shirk finds that states that attract more investment create more jobs. Indeed, Orecha writes that right-to-work laws increased manufacturing employment by approximately 30%. Austin 21 corroborates that the right-to-work regions have a 1.6% higher employment rate and a 1.4% higher labor force participation than residents of similar non-right-to-work areas. Importantly, Austin finds that wages and labor compensation do not appear to be lower on average in right-to-work areas. Rather, NERA 15 finds that right-to-work states ultimately see an increase in employment levels. Second is growth in GDP and personal income. NERA 15 finds right-to-work laws have positive direct and indirect effects on economic output. Right-to-work states have exhibited more rapid growth in GDP and manufacturing output compared to non-right-to-work states, especially in recent years. Furthermore, the data shows that higher growth in output has translated into higher growth in personal income. Personal income in right-to-work states rose by a higher margin than non-right-to-work states over the period of their study, 39% versus only 26%. They quantify output has grown faster in right-to-work states, rising by 38% compared to 29% in non-right-to-work states. Thus, we negate.
Okay, you ready for cross?
Yeah, do you want the first question?
Sure. Okay, let's talk about business creation. Your evidence analyzes small businesses. Who creates these small businesses?
Our evidence is not only about small businesses. It just says if a business exists, they're going to open a new branch in a state with right-to-work laws. And if a business doesn't exist, they're more likely to open it in a state that has right-to-work laws.
Well, I'm specifically talking about your innovation subpoint. It talks about small businesses being the most innovative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question to that is, who creates these small businesses? Are these like the wealthy, like wealthy, like I guess like 1% elite, or are these like the middle class type of people?
It's probably a mix of both. I mean, you need a good amount of capital to open a small business, so it's probably like your average barbecue dad. It's somebody who like has tens of thousands of dollars set aside.
So like the exact number is like 60% of like small businesses that are innovative are created by middle class people.
Sure. I mean, you can make an argument in speech if you want, but I'm going to take a question now.
Yeah, go for it.
You tell me that voter turnout increases in states with unionization, but you don't read me any evidence that has any type of causation. Is it not true that people who are more likely to be involved in a union are probably also more likely to be politically involved? It's just like a personality type.
Actually, we do read you causation. That's going to be the Gall-Condor evidence that it talks about, because whenever unions have to spend more money on attracting people / keeping people, right, they're going to spend less money on political participation. That's the causational evidence. But speaking of causation, let's talk about y'all's case. You specifically, let's talk about this Austin 21 evidence that talks about right to work laws having higher employments, other stuff like that. That doesn't isolate that right to work laws were the reason, does it?
Sorry, you cut out.
Oh, the Austin 21 evidence, your impact level, that does not isolate that a right to work laws were the reason that your statistic occurred. It just says here was before and here was after. That's true, right?
I mean, insofar as right to work laws are the thing that's changing, we'd say it's pretty clear that they're the cause.
Wait, so was that a yes or was that a no, right? It doesn't analyze that
the
reason was.
Yeah, it's the same as all of the evidence that y'all read, because we can't look at the exact same group of people in the exact same place and simultaneously have them have right to work laws and not have right to work laws. So you have to look at similar groups and similar demographics in states with and without right to work laws.
Actually, we can do that, and we'll do that in the next speech, but you can have a question.
Serious. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about this idea of benefits and life expectancy. You say that there are more deaths from diabetes in states that have right to work laws. How is it the fault of right to work laws and not, say, big pharma increasing the price of insulin?
Yeah, so specifically the Wallace evidence talks about how there's more employee provided benefits whenever you don't have right to work laws, and those employees benefits are healthcare insurance and health benefits, right? And so that is directly related, right? The more benefits you have, the more safe health you have.
Sure, that's cross.
Yeah.
Awesome. So as a brief off-time roadmap, I'm just going to be going down the negative case. So with that said, let's begin. Start with my opponent's first contention where they talk about personal savings. Now, this is the entire thesis of our argument, is that by allowing for union membership dues to be optional, people just won't pay, which is the entirety of our case and the links in our case, that declining union participation membership results in a litany of harms to workers, such as declining wages, increased likelihood of poverty, and a litany of other things that we discussed in our case, as well as the other benefits that unions provide, such as workplace safety, which is directly correlated to thousands of lives. So all of that's going to outweigh, and they don't even read any impact to this contention. So you should just cross-apply all the arguments that we make on our case. But go to my opponent's second contention where they talk about business investment. First, an overarching response to this contention is that there's correlation, not causation. My opponents raised a lot of evidence about how right-to-work states perform better than non-right-to-work states. They don't read any causal evidence that right-to-work laws themselves are what cause the economic benefit, as opposed to other policies that these states enact. That's important because Collins 14 finds is that a lot of the aggregate data that my opponent cites are misleading and mask substantial variation amongst both right-to-work union security states. In particular, the fact that the right-to-work states have other policies that promote economic growth, and it's not specific to right-to-work states. That's important because when you look at state by state, comparing within the state before and after, what they find is that there's no relationship with economic growth or employment that my opponents talk about, but the overwhelming amount of evidence, when you control for this fact, finds that right-to-work states result in a decline of wages by 8% due to the decline of collective bargaining by unions, which push wages higher. They make a couple of links in specific. Their first link is about capital expenditures. My first response to this is that they don't read any terminal impact. They say CapEx declines 6.5% in free cash flow, or increases 6.5% in right-to-work states. But they don't say why that's a good thing. I would say that if that's money that they're spending on a new fixed asset, that's money that could be spent on the workers, right? That's money that could be spent in the pockets of the American people. And that's going to be more important than nebulous capital spending by businesses. So you should always prefer what's happening to the workers, their livelihood, their means, like employee health insurance. All of those things are more beneficial than just general capital expenditures. Their second link talks about business investment, how there's an increase in the amount of businesses that go to right-to-work states. The problem with this is that, again, this is correlation, not causation. There's other factors that cause these businesses to locate in right-to-work states. They don't prove that it's specific to right-to-work states. But secondly, even if they prove this argument, right, that's not a good thing. They're saying that right to work laws incentivize businesses, and these businesses are attracted because they don't want to pay their workers a living wage, right? That's obviously not a good thing. And the fact that we isolate the right to work laws on balance result in the decline of wages and an increase in poverty, that's obviously going to be more important. Their third line talks about innovation. They don't read any terminal impact to innovation. And secondly, again, this is not causal. And thirdly, they need to specify what type of innovation happens. On their impacts about employment, a couple of responses here. First, the 7.7 explains is that right to work laws harm the average worker with little to no trickle down effect from any marginal benefit to businesses, and that they only isolate an increase in manufacturing employment, but overall employment falls when you look at look at things holistically. And then secondly, they talk about GDP, but a lot of their evidence isn't causal. So you should always prefer the evidence we read from our case that is causal, that makes specific claims from the Gandler 22 evidence, is that the negative effect of unionization that has on employment and wages, when you take into effect the other policies that the states that are more likely to adopt right to work laws pass. So the evidence in totality is clear. Right to work laws harm unionization, and unionization is key to the middle class. It's key to worker protection, and it's key to voter turnout. And for that reason, I strongly urge a vote for the affirmative.
Is everybody ready? Cool. In that case, my time starts now. Let's start on our case. The majority of their arguments against our case is just that our evidence doesn't imply causation. That's not true. Number one, they don't look at any of the warrants that we actually talk about, which does associate correlation and causation for why the right to work laws actually increase employment. But the second important thing is that all of the arguments they use against our case applies to their arguments as well. For example, they say things like, oh, wages might be lower in right to work states, or that there are higher levels of mortality. A big reason for why this might be is because a lot of these states are conservative, rural, and poor. So there's no reason as to why they have a higher association to causation than we do, and they never read any actual methodology that supports that claim. So to that degree, let's go to our argument about employment. They never respond to our evidence, which says that manufacturing jobs increased by 30% after the implementation of right to work laws. Moreover, we look specifically at a comparative of states like Oklahoma and Idaho. None of these states experience any of the decrease in wages that they claim will happen when right to work laws are implemented. At that point, it doesn't matter what evidence they have if in actual examples of right to work laws being implemented, there was no decrease in wages and there was an increase in employment. Moreover, they really missed the mark on actually responding to our warrant, which is very clear that when there are implementations of right to work laws, number one, employees feel that they have more freedom in their employment and know that they don't have to pay union dues, which increases the likelihood that they actually try to get these jobs, which is why there's such a marked increase in manufacturing jobs. With that being said, let's go over to their case. On their first contention about unionization, they talk about the free rider problem. Our argument, however, is that even if a lot of people aren't paying union dues, unions then become more accountable. According to Macretus 19, right to work laws encourage unions to become more competitive in the services that they offer to their members. Absent right to work laws, unions are guaranteed a steady stream of income from union dues since workers don't have a choice of whether or not to pay. When there's greater competition, the Marquis evidence finds that right to work law states have higher management practice scores. So even if less people are paying, unions become better at their jobs, which solves back for all of their impacts and increases the amount of people that eventually pay these dues. But then secondly, Collins 14 finds that that right to work laws that reflect the state's pre-existing opposition to unions, and that the diversity in right to work laws simply reflects diversity in preferences towards unions. That means that right to work laws have no independent effect on labor organizing. Right to work states actually have lower states of unionization because that's the preference of workers in those states. At that point, the free rider problem doesn't exist. To that degree, let's go over to their argument about the middle class. They say that there's higher wages. Again, this isn't true. We find that there was no decrease in wages in states like Oklahoma and Idaho. Moreover, if people don't have to pay union dues, that means that they have higher levels of savings. So for the people that aren't able to, they still have extra money. Secondly, on decreasing voter turnout, for you to vote in the first place, you need the means to be able to vote. At that point, things like higher levels of employment and the ability to not pay strenuous union dues would help people go to the ballots. Secondly, there's no terminal impact for what this voting looks like or what policies would actually be passed. Moreover, even they can see that there's better economic policies in states that have right to work laws, which is what they say causes our correlation to not be causation. So at that point, this argument clearly isn't true. But then on this lives argument, this isn't true either. For example, Huffman and Elliott found that empirical analysis found that that there was no impact. The impact of right to work laws on employer unfair labor practice charges is completely insignificant. To that degree, there's no actual reduction in the rate of mortality. Thus, we're proud to negate.
As first speaker, may I ask the first question?
Sure.
So a lot of what you talked about in the last speech is that you used the example of Idaho and Oklahoma. And so I guess my first question is, there's 27 states that have right to work laws right now. And who were like the two most recent adopters of right to work laws?
You told me.
Or two of them. It was Idaho and Oklahoma. So I guess why isolate those two as examples when you have a lot of other examples of states who have had them for the past, century?
I think given that a lot of our evidence is recent, and this is what the recent literature is talking about, as like you said, these are the first two states that recently became right to work. I think that it's pertinent to look at those states.
And who's the main participator in labor unions? Like, is it like I'm talking about demographic wise? Is it women, men, minorities, not minorities?
I mean, I think it depends on the industry.
So I guess, but overall, we've read evidence in our case that it's generally women and it's generally people of color. And so you isolate the examples of Idaho and Oklahoma, states that have way lower representation of those groups within their union workforce. So I guess my question is, why is Idaho and Oklahoma representative of the rest of the country?
And literature talks about those states because those are the new states.
And we read evidence why those states aren't representative.
Manufacturing employment increasing is general to the entire country, so it doesn't really matter.
No, your manufacturing card talks about manufacturing in Idaho specifically, I believe.
So, talking about your business, like your voting argument, like what policies are going to be passed? Like what policies have been passed in states that don't have right to work laws? Like, can you give me some examples or policies that weren't passed because of right to work laws?
So we don't isolate specific policies, but in general, our argument says, and it is causal, that's one of the responses that you make, is that when you have an electorate that represents, like the policies that are passed generally are reflective of the electorate and the candidate that's elected. And so when you have a candidate or a demographic that's less likely to vote, like in particular low income and middle income individuals as a result of declining union participation, you have a candidate that more aligns with the interest of like the wealthy that doesn't pass representative policies, which is why the Mahler study found that there's a direct correlation between that and inequality in subsequent years, looking at like a holistic level of policies.
You want to ask a question?
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is you isolate like manufacturing employment, but I guess like what's the specific warrant for manufacturing that doesn't apply to other sectors? Like why specific manufacturing?
That's just what the literature talks about, but I would say that our warrants apply to any industry because people don't feel the obligation to pay those.
Well, then why didn't you read evidence from other industries, I guess? Because we've read evidence that other industries experience no effect in employment.
The card just happens to be about manufacturing. I don't know. Yeah, that's time.
Okay, I'm going to start on the neg case, then go to the off case. Let's go start on the bottom of the neg case. Is anyone not ready? Let's talk about the last response Conrad read in rebuttal. What we say is that manufacturing jobs, even if they have increased 38%, it has not increased in any other sector, and only trickle-down effects have only happened in manufacturing. That's the Stevens 7 card. They just say manufacturing jobs increased 38%. Of course, that's true. Conrad also told you that whenever businesses, have to go to different states, that causes capital flight. So what has to happen is that businesses go into new states, and they need to build up manufacturing in the short term. These jobs are really short term and they take away jobs as a whole because when businesses move from different sectors to different states to have right to work laws, you're obviously laying out jobs. That's why the Stevens evidence found that on net, there was a total job loss, even if they account for just the manufacturing sector. That's like an easy place you can just easily vote neg. You are hurting jobs as a whole. Vote AF. Regardless, let's go to the AF case. Our argument in this round is that unions are one of the most important things, and whenever you have the free rider problem, which is whenever right to work laws exist, you don't have to pay to join unions. That's going to cause union wages as a whole to decrease. That was going to be from the Stevens evidence as well. Was found that it has a decrease of 4%. They give you a couple responses on the top. They just say that it causes more accountability. One, even if they're more accountability, they still cause a decrease in wages. They could be more efficient. They could use their money better. But on net, that still allows for our argument to trigger because you're still decreasing the wages of the workers. But also, two, this also creates a long-term issue where we see that in the long term, unions cannot pay wages. Our evidence is simply much better on this question because it accounts for a long-term study versus theirs much more short-term. They give you a second response that says there's pre-existing things from this call-in evidence. The funny thing is we read that call-in evidence in case and it finds, and it concludes the end of the article that unions are more likely to have higher wages of 15% and right to work laws have decreased those by 8%. That's pretty clear in this case. The most important argument in this round is going to be our argument about the middle class. They give you examples from Oklahoma and Idaho, trying to say that there's higher levels of savings. But as Conrad told you in Crossfire, that's simply just really bad examples. One, Oklahoma and Idaho are really late adopters, and they both had really low levels of union membership before that, like less than 10%. And so that's like one reason why these examples are not good, versus our examples look to 27 different states are just simply much better. That finds the unions the right to work laws decrease unions by 8%. But moreover, Oklahoma's heavy reliance on oil for extraction and like state funding already puts like this entire system just completely way different. You should prefer ever evidence on this. Why is this the most important argument in the round? Their argument relies on business creation, but 60% of businesses that are truly innovative and that hire the most amount of people are going to be coming from middle-class workers. So if middle-class workers are decreasing their wages, they cannot afford to do these other ventures outside of work, such as starting businesses and other things, which is why middle-class wages are the most important argument. And also this outweighs on scope because these are the largest class of the United States and they get no benefits from like the federal government because they are not below the poverty line, which means that their wages are the most important to maintain, which is why we urge an AF ballot.
There's been a lot of argumentation about correlation versus causation, and at the end of the day, neither one of us is going to be able to isolate one effect to one specific law. That's where we're going to look at the warranting of our arguments and the explanation of why something is true. We're going to agree with them that unions are probably a good thing, but where they super mishandle our responses to their case is where they don't interact with their argument, where we tell you that unions are better in states with right to work laws. Remember, they tell you that right to work laws make it the workers' choice and that less people join unions. We see that's true. Like we see empirically when workers have the choice, they're turning away from unions. That's why membership is down 12%. Workers do not think it's worth it to have to pay these high dues and to lose their individual freedom. But they mishandle our term. Remember what Tejas tells you, is that in states with right to work laws, when it's the worker's choice whether to join the union or not and whether to pay those union dues or not, there's an increased pressure on unions to actually appeal to the workers that they are meant to be representing and to actually market themselves as something that is useful to people, to this middle class that they keep talking about. That's why, and they drop this, we see an increased management practice scores in states with right to work laws, and we see that unions are actually better in those states because there is pressure for them to actually help the population where they're supposed to be serving. First of all, that turns their case. It's going to solve back for all of their impacts. They say that unions are really good because they have all of these positive effects on voter turnout and lives in the middle class, and we say that's probably true, but it's always going to be better in states with right to work laws because the unions have the pressure put on them to actually help people. But then they drop they go for the middle class argument, but they drop our NERA evidence, which is really clear. It says that personal income increased by 39% in right to work states because people were no longer paying union dues. They were getting better jobs and they were actually trying for jobs that they were de-incentivized from applying for before because now they no longer had to pay like 1/10 of their paycheck in union dues. That's why we don't see a decrease in wages in Idaho or Oklahoma, the two states which most recently implemented right to work laws, simply because they don't decrease wages. They also don't have any impact evidence on how workplace safety actually decreases. They don't like give us a terminal impact. But then on our case, remember you're looking to our warranting here. We tell you really specifically that in these comparative actual examples of states that have just passed right to work laws, there's been an increase in employment and a decrease and an increase in personal savings and wages. With right to work laws, there's more freedom in employment, there's no union dues, and there's an increased incentive for people to actually go out and get these jobs. That's why our Austin evidence says overall, in states with right to work laws, there's been a 1.6% increase in employment and a 1.4% increase in labor force participation. The only thing they tell you is that these jobs are in manufacturing. We'd say, manufacturing jobs are also really important. These are the people doing things like construction and plumbing and electricians that like need the ability to like refuse the union and actually advocate for themselves as individuals. But then they tell you they're short-term jobs. We say that's not true. If somebody is like a plumber as their trade, they're not going to suddenly drop it and like start a desk job in a couple of years.
Awesome. So as for speaking team, can we ask the first question?
Go for it.
So let's start with the last thing, or the first thing you talked about like what's the function of unions? So I guess like what do labor unions do?
Well, it really depends on the work like that you're doing, but essentially,
but in general, like what's one? Oh, go ahead.
It's when employees band together to get like more bargaining power with their employer. There's a lot of stuff that comes along with it, a lot of union politics, especially in larger companies. Employees.
So you read evidence, your evidence says that when right to work laws go into effect, unions focus more on drawing attention. So is drawing attention like trying to attract new members? How is this related to, so if they're attracting new members, right, isn't that less time that they're spending on their core function, which is collective bargaining?
Not really. So I don't know if you work in a field that actually has unions. I know a lot of people who do, my parents do. And a big part of when you're trapped into joining a union is that union has no incentive to like actually go out and do helpful things because everyone's going to pay their dues no matter what. The union's going to exist no matter what. Like they don't actually have to make themselves appealing to the workers. They don't actually have to do things that help them. But when workers have the choice whether or not to join the union, when there's dues that are up in the air and you have to earn that money from the people that you're meant to represent, you're more.
So what do unions do with their dues, I guess?
They pay, we see in our evidence, they pay the people who run the unions pretty hefty salaries.
Or they pay the people who collectively bargain. So if there's less money for people to collectively bargain, there's a decrease in collective bargaining, even if they're trying to attract new members. And I guess my other question is, if a union is engaging in collective bargaining to both union and non-union members, what's the incentive to join the union?
You get a voice in what that bargaining is like advocating for. Only when you join the union are you able to say, hey, I want the union to go up to the CEO of my company and tell them this. That's why you join, for the same reason you like go out and vote, because you want to stay in politics. But could we take a question?
Yep.
So you guys tell us that in your argument about causation and correlation on our case, you say that even though we have all of these positive economic outputs in our examples, you say they're not because of right to work laws. They're just because there are better economic policies in these states in the first place, right?
Yep.
So then when we talk about like your arguments about voter turnout or workplace safety, I guess I just don't understand how you can say that right to work states have better economic policies and like their politics are better, but simultaneously it's worse because people aren't voting. Like,
so I guess the distinction is that it's better for businesses. So they have policies that are more pro-business, that are more, I guess, anti-worker. But in terms of like this correlation causation debate, I think the important thing is that we've stipulated that your evidence did not control for like endogenous variables that could affect the efficacy of right to work laws, whereas we read evidence specific in like to our wage argument, for example, that controls for like these other variables such as state by state differences in local policy, and found that unions or right to work decrease wages.
Our NERA evidence is pretty holistic, and it says overall personal income increases in states with right to work laws. There's more workforce participation and there's higher employment, but that's cross.
All right, I'll begin. So it's going to start on my case and then going over to the other side's case. So the first major voting issue in the round is our issue of unionization. My opponents agree that unions are really important, and this is going to be their fatal flaw in the round. Extend the argument that we've made repeatedly throughout the case that right to work laws result in a free rider problem where people try to benefit from unions without paying for the dues. The result is that unions have less money collectively and that they're less able to engage in activities like collective bargaining. They get up there in the last speech that says that unions try to attract more members. This is a turn because if they're attracting more members, they're doing less things like collectively bargaining for higher wages, which is why our evidence is very clear that union membership is associated with higher wages, and absent unions or in states with right to work laws, you see a decline in wages overall, and this comes down to the evidence debate. We say a lot of our responses to their case are correlation, not causation, and they try to say the same thing to us. But the Hirsch et al. 12 CARB, which was cleanly extended in every speech in this debate, found is that when you control for endogenous variables such as state-by-state differential, and you look at all 27 states that have adopted right-to-work laws in the past century, right-to-work laws decrease wages by an average of 6 percentage points, controlling for all other factors. This answers their near 15 evidence and all of the other evidence they read about Idaho and Oklahoma, because these are isolated examples that aren't representative of the rest of the country, and that they're just not representative in general because they had low union membership of less than 10% to begin with. So these states just aren't representative. So once you control for all these variables, they decrease wages and they increase poverty, decrease the strength of the middle class. The second voting issue is our turn that we've made on their case about jobs. We read the turn that there's capital flight as a result of right to work laws being imposed, which was the Stevens evidence that results in a total job loss, which means even if they show that there's an increase in jobs in the manufacturing sector, there's a decrease of jobs overall across all sectors, which was a clean turn in their case. But regardless of that, the fact is simple. You should vote off the wages argument because even if people have jobs, but they're unable to provide a meal for their families, those jobs aren't good quality jobs. So you should prioritize high paying jobs. And that's the reason why you should be voting for us in today's debate.
They make a big problem in this entire debate, and that problem is that they say that we get rid of unions or that we're against unions. That is not true. This is a misconstrual of our position. We are not against unions. Our position is to make unions more accountable to their members so that they do the jobs that our opponents talk about better. Yes, we agree that unions collectively bargain and we agree that they increase wages, but we say that they do those jobs more effectively if there is accountability and they're not just getting a guaranteed steady stream of income from workers that's guaranteed. That's why the Marquitas evidence, which they never respond to in the entire round, says that personal management scores of unions increases in right to work states. But at that point, let's vote on the wages argument. When you look at states like Oklahoma and Idaho, there is no decrease in wages. They say these are isolated examples. Great, let's look at the nearer 15 evidence, which they never sufficiently respond to. This evidence is holistic. It is not looking at specific states. And this evidence actually tells you that there's a 39% increase in personal income. Their only real response to this argument is that, oh, if unions are marketing to their members, they're not going to be able to collectively bargain. No, the way they're marketing to their members is by collectively bargaining more efficiently. That's why more people would join the union, and those people would be more committed than anything else. The only other voter they introduce in this round is this argument about jobs, but they never read a terminal impact. So let's not consider that. Let's look at the wages argument. We both give these overarching pieces of evidence. At that point, let's look at the warranting. We say the warranting is always better on our side because they ignore the Marquitas evidence, which says that personal management scores of unions has gone up, which means that unions have become more effective. That's why there's a 39% increase in personal incomes, which is an increase in the economy and an increase for those in the middle class. For those reasons, we're extremely proud to negate.